So we've lost a few people, and tomorrow I want you guys to be sure and tell them what they missed
Okay. Yeah.
with this last session, because this is the fun one. The rest of it, but this is the best part.
Interesting picture.
Yeah, well, so does
Like
the
an
iron
old-time
tool
hammer.
cased in stone show how old man is, or how quickly the sandstone can turn to stone?
Ooh, a little of both.
Well, it might be kind of one or the other.
Oh.
I mean, man is going to be 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years old, maybe, something like that,
Yeah.
depending on how you look at it. I titled this The Antiquity of Man because it's actually about the dinosaurs. So when it comes to evolutionist theory, say what you like about genetics, mutations, natural selection, dinosaurs are the essence. Hang on. There's a big water spot right in front of my eye. Dinosaurs are the essence, the holy grail, if you will, of the evolution picture of Earth and life history. Solid evidence for the coexistence of dinosaurs and humans would shake the foundations of evolutionary theory because, of course, the dinosaurs are supposed to have been extinct by the time hominids arrived on the scenes. And this is from Dr. Philip Kitcher, Abusing Science, The Case Against Creationism, 1982. If somebody could provide a coercive case for the fact that American Indians dealt with dinosaurs on a regular basis, then the time frames which evolutionists so love to use as a magic wand to enable their doctrines, there's the philosophy again, would be demolished, the entire doctrine of evolution broken. Not that there is any lack of logical proofs that no amount of time would suffice for macroevolution. I talked about mutation theory, it doesn't work. But without those timescales, no version of evolution is even thinkable, much less possible.
Yeah.
We do know from historical documentary records of our own time that man and dinosaurs did in fact live together.
Like there's proof right there, Barney.
Yep. And
Isn't there a cave and I
Yeah,
think,
Dino.
we're going to get to that.
oh, okay,
A cave where they drew him on there, yeah.
yeah.
We've even discovered that not only did dinosaurs have a superior intellect, they had talent.
They did.
Yeah.
Oh, Dino played a mean bass.
Natural Bridges National Monument, Utah.
Oh,
Now, I want to stop for just a moment.
oh gosh.
I'm going to show you a series of lines of evidence that could suggest,
Yeah. Oh.
in some cases absolutely do suggest, that dinosaurs and man were contemporaries of each other. So when you're out on a trip or you see something really interesting or something falling out of the sky or whatever, what do you usually do right away?
Get your
Okay.
camera.
You whip this baby out, you hit camera, and you
Too
start
late.
taking pictures of whatever it is. That's what we do. We take digital photographs of stuff, right? Well, that wasn't any different thousands of years ago.
Oh yeah.
We took our digital photographs back then. They just were a different digital medium.
Right.
They might have been rock carvings, they might have been sculptures, they might have been paintings. And many of these lines of evidence I'm about to show you, a couple of them have, potential difficulties, ways that the evolutionists could argue, oh, that's just this or that or whatever. This first one, I included, but I think it's probably one of the weaker examples that I have at the Kachina Bridge in Natural Bridges National Monument. There's this
There it is.
thing that looks a little bit like a sauropod dinosaur.
It does.
Here, I'll use this.
I can see its head right there with the
gonna
little
jiggle.
thing on it.
So right there's the head, here's the long neck, the body, and the tail, and down here you see the legs. Now,
Yeah.
The legs, I didn't want it to do that. Can I make that go away? No. I guess it'll just go away in a second. The legs are a little different than the rest of the body, which makes me wonder, were they just making a snake up there? But still, there is some potential that this is exactly what we're looking
Are there
at.
other drawings that are around it there?
There might be.
I was just wondering if it was a drawing at all. It looks like a stain, kind of.
Well, here's a man and a brontosaur together. Now here, the images are a little bit highlighted, or they're augmented, so you can see them better. So there's
Oh,
the
yeah.
brontosaurus thing, and there's a man.
Okay.
This dates back to the time of the Anasazi Indians, about AD 400 to 1400, based on the patination, the patina that's developed on the rock.
All right. Now, they were in South America, right? Anastasi, right?
No, that's North America, the
In North
American
America,
West.
right, okay.
There's a petroglyph at Natural Bridges National Monument that bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur, specifically a brontosaurus, with a long-tailed neck, small head, and all.
Yeah.
Now, this is from an evolutionist named Fran Barnes, and she's also a rock art authority. One of the staff members at the park there says, some people think it's really a picture of a dinosaur, but they're crazy.
That's what it looks like.
What was it that George Wald said? We can't accept that on philosophical grounds, so we choose to believe the impossible. This is a philosophical argument that this person is putting forth. It's not an argument. She says they're crazy because she or he, because they can't conceive of the idea. Their philosophy is that the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago.
Could have been a little kid's rendition of a dog.
Well, it could have been a lot of things, I suppose. When it comes to the origin of life on Earth, there's only two possibilities. And this is that George Wald quote. And the fact that we can't accept the special creation argument on philosophical grounds, so we choose to believe the impossible. And this kind of falls into that. Here's another petroglyph from Havasupai Canyon, Grand Canyon, Arizona. This is the drawing on the left is an artist's rendition of Edmontosaurus,
Right.
which is a sauropod dinosaur. Many of the sauropod dinosaurs we find, and this is important here in a few slides, tended to get up on their hind legs so they could reach higher up into trees.
Like, well, he only has those little bitty arms in the front.
Well, this is a sauropod. This is like a brontosaurus.
Right.
So it would normally walk around on all fours.
But it looks like it's only got two legs.
Well, then it's got the arms on the sides
skinny
there.
arms, yeah.
And there's a petroglyph in Havasupai Canyon that resembles, or could resemble, a sauropod dinosaur
Yeah.
up on its hind legs.
Right.
You be the judge. Here's an interesting one. This is the tomb of Bishop Richard Bell, Carlisle Cathedral in Northern England. He was elected bishop of the Carlisle Cathedral in 1478 and served 17 years before resigning in 1495. This is his tomb. It's a floor tomb, and it's got these like brass engraving, this brass strip that's engraved.
Right.
And it's engraved with a number of animals.
Right.
So you see like maybe a dog, a fish, a bird, an eel. And then you see this, which looks a little bit like a pair of sauropod type dinosaurs with their necks locked together. Here's the tail of one of them here. Here's the tail of the other one here.
Right.
Here's the neck here and the neck here. They're interacting somehow, and maybe not in a friendly way, I don't know.
A couple of dogs fighting.
Well, they don't look like dogs. I have dogs, they don't look anything like that. Their necks are short.
Right. Okay.
It looks like
Dinosaurs.
dinosaurs. So on the left side here, you can see a dinosaur that might be like the one on that side, and then here's a dinosaur. Well, this one has some spikes on its tail that you see there. So, and several types of dinosaurs did have spikes on their tails,
Yeah.
which obviously they would use for defense. So, you can be the judge. Are those dinosaurs that are engraved there? And here's part of the point of this. This was in the 1400s, okay?
Right.
We didn't have museums like this in the 1400s. I think we started paleontological museums in like the early 1800s or late 1700s, where paleontologists would go out and actually collect the bones of these skeletons and put them together and flesh them out to figure out what they looked like. We weren't doing that until fairly late in the game. All these examples I'm giving you predate that significantly, but they don't predate 65 million years.
No.
The oldest example I'm going to give you is about 4,500 years old, 2500 BC. So if those are engravings of dinosaurs, how did these people know what they looked like?
Unless they saw them themselves.
Unless they saw them themselves.
1495?
Behold now, behemoth. Think about it. Okay, I'm going to flash a slide up for about a second. I want you guys to look at it, and then I want you to tell me what you think you saw. Now, this is from the Tapram Temple in Angkor Wat, Cambodia. At one of the gates, there's a series of blocks in this stone column, and the blocks have engravings on them. And it'll be like an ornate, like a surrounding a circle type thing or something, with some kind of an animal in the middle.
Yeah.
And like one of them is a frog, and there's some other things. And then there's this thing. So I'm going to flash it for about a second. Clear your eyes, get ready to watch, and then I want you to tell me what you think you just saw.
Stegosaurus.
Stegosaurus. Two people said Stegosaurus. This is the Tapram Temple. It was actually built in around 1100 AD by some guy to honor his mom, and it's one of the biggest temples in Angkor Wat, Cambodia, to honor his mom. Sons, you're not measuring up. Anyway, by one of the gates is this column, and there's a something, I don't know what that is. That looks like a deer or something. That's a person, a person, a person, who knows what. And here's our little Stegosaurus guy. Now, sometimes we can actually do more damage than good. These things develop what's called a patina. Rock weathers right before our very eyes. So in the space of human history, in the space of a few thousand years, an exposed rock face will darken, redden, or become more black. If it's iron oxides, it can redden. If it's manganese oxides, it can be more like a dark gray or black. But they change over time and within human history. And one of the things the guys that discovered this did was they went and cleaned up that one block really well so you could see it better. And I don't know whether that really helped. Because if I was a real skeptic, I could almost say that somebody went in there and cut out that one part of the block and made a replacement block and stuck it in there with a Stegosaurus.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the overall column, it seems really unlikely that somebody could even do that. Some people have said that it's like a hippo or a hog
It
or
is.
something
Rhino.
in big foliage. So those are leaves across its back.
Right.
Is that possible?
Yeah.
I suppose. But honestly, that looks like a stegosaurus. Those leaves are way too orderly.
Yeah.
So this is 1,100 years ago. We had the Carlisle Cathedral 500 years ago. We have this 1,100 years ago. We've got the Anasazi Indians between 500 and 1,500 years ago. Have any of you heard of the Ica burial stones? This is a bag of cats, okay? There's like 30,000 of these stones. They depict a lot of different things. Some of them appear to depict dinosaurs and man interacting. Some of them depict some of the medical procedures that the indigenous peoples of these areas were known to be able to do eons ago, brain surgery and things. You've heard about that. They're not far from the Nazca lines in Peru, and you know the significance of that is supposedly alien visitations. Some of them appear to show maybe something to do with alien visitations, which isn't helping. But one interesting thing, these are like andesite boulders, river worn, that have developed a patina on the outside, and they would chop through the patina to make the pictures. And some of the ones, especially the ones with the dinosaurs, where they cut through to etch in the pictures, you can see that is actually starting to develop a patina. It's starting to age. Some of them aren't. So they have very strict antiquities laws in Peru, and the person who was collecting all of these things got nailed by the authorities for violating antiquities laws. And he said, well, I'm making them all myself. And they let him go. And then later he admitted, no, I didn't make them all myself. So, like I say, this is a little bit of a bag of cats. It's kind of a mess. It's a piece of information that may or may not really be valid, but to whatever degree it is valid, it is consistent with the idea that dinosaurs do not predate man by 65 million years. We'll get to another example soon that is actually much, much better. But here's one of the Ica burial stones. So this depicts, it looks like a T-Rex type critter that's grabbing onto this guy. Actually, that wouldn't be a T-Rex, that would be a velociraptor at that size. And this guy is stabbing it in the head with a knife.
Oh, there you go.
Now, I saw Jurassic Park. I don't think this would be possible. This may actually be telling us that Jurassic Park wasn't maybe quite so accurate. But here's another one attacking him from behind, and that would be consistent with the idea that these velociraptors hunt in packs, whatever.
Is that,
Huh?
was that showing teeth? Is that what it had?
Yeah, you can see teeth in the one on the
Okay.
left, for sure.
All right.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be that guy, whatever, because
I know, and he's as big as the dinosaur.
it doesn't look like it's going really well for him.
Oh, don't? I
And
can't
that-
tell.
Well, he's being attacked from behind by one, too.
Oh, I see, okay. Yeah.
I like this one. It's a guy riding along on a triceratops smoking a peace pipe.
Really?
Well, he's smoking something right here. That looks like a pipe.
Oh, yeah,
That's definitely a triceratops.
Just out for a stroll.
yeah.
If this is real,
Makes you wonder what he's smoking.
it never occurred to me. If this is real, this is extremely damaging to the whole concept of the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago.
But isn't it true that that they did find dinosaur bones?
Well, they find dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were real. They do find dinosaur bones. And actually, fairly recently, they've been finding, I believe it was a T-Rex skeleton, and I think it was up in North or South Dakota.
Yeah.
And
They had like his head and everything.
Well-
Had a big fight over it.
they found bones that still had intact marrow and pliable connecting tissue within the
Right.
bone.
Right. DNA.
You could take it, you could bend it, and it would bend back. This is actually documented, and the scientists are mightily struggling with this because
Yeah.
in 65 million years, you wouldn't have any soft components of that bone. The bone would be completely lithified. One of my sisters at church she is a biologist, and she actually worked with me a little bit on some of these lessons, giving the biological angle on it. And she looked into this whole thing about the T-Rex bones that have the soft marrow type material. And there's absolutely no way after 65 million years. That's maybe a few thousand years, maybe. So we do find dinosaur bones. Some of them don't appear to be at all that old.
Was that one in ice?
I don't know.
Some kind of clay or something.
No, they have found intact mammoths in ice that were just amazingly well preserved.
Still had the meat and
But
everything.
mammoths existed easily within biblical time. We know that we coexisted with them. We know that we probably overhunted them. But we know that mammoths existed around the last ice age. So they're not that old. And I mean, they're basically elephants.
Hairy elephants.
So-
Yeah.
I like this one. So this guy is being attacked by a T-Rex, and here's Malcolm being attacked by the T-Rex. So I guess the first one was the Velociraptor. The next one was a Triceratops. This is a T-Rex.
And this is on those burial stones.
These are these Ica burial stones.
Okay.
So if they're real, what else can we deduce from this than we lived during a time when dinosaurs lived? Because these stones very clearly depict dinosaurs and man interacting. This is an interesting stone. It seems to show a man being attacked by an Apatosaurus, which is a small sauropod-type dinosaur.
With a beak.
It's reported by pygmies living in the Congo that a large animal called Mokolema bembe, an animal that best fits the description of a sauropod dinosaur, is said to aggressively defend itself in its territory and will attack humans and other animals but never eat them. The scene on this stone seems to show very similar behavior, giving credibility to both accounts. So this stone shows a behavior, and there are native people in the Congo who describe a similar behavior. There's consistency between two different scientific records, and by extension, behold now, behemoth. As opposed to, there used to be this thing called behemoth. Let me tell you about him. Many of you have heard of this, the Paluxy River, Glen Rose, Texas. This is one that I won't say I find it dubious. It's just not as convincing as some other things.
Footprints.
They've got a bunch of dinosaur tracks that seem to exist with human tracks.
Yeah.
Here's a set of dinosaur tracks kind of going off to the right, and human tracks going up to where the guy is actually standing in the human tracks.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's helping him standing there like that. But this is etched in rock. These are not brand new tracks.
Right.
This is an interesting one because it appears to show a dinosaur track, which is this large thing here, and then this human footprint within the dinosaur track. So if they're valid, maybe so. And one of the explanations that somebody came up with, and we like to come up with these really cutesy explanations, was
Uh-oh.
the dinosaurs and man are all running together to get away from the flood,
Right.
or something to that general effect.
Or the lava.
Anyway,
I don't
don't have that picture in my Bible.
Here,
That's how you get the tribes
Good.
mixed up.
here is the one that I find the most compelling. The Chupacaro Indians of Acambaro, Mexico. Not Chupacabre, Chupacaro. Chupacabre, we used to have a Chupacabre. Its name was Tilly. We also called her Tilly the Evil Chihuahua. I believe Chupacabre come from Chihuahuas.
You
Which-
think that's a Chihuahua?
No, that's not a Chihuahua. Early in the 20th century, ceramic figures were being unearthed in Mexico from the Chupacaro Indians, a tribe who lived in the area from about 500 BC to 500 AD. They included figurines of dinosaurs, and some of the pieces included a human figure with a dinosaur. History shows us that it was the 20th century before modern science really began to understand about dinosaurs. How did these Indians know so much about dinosaurs?
Because they must have been there when the Indians were.
These were their digital photographs.
Yeah.
They did these stone carvings and clay sculptures of these things. I was trained and worked for a number of years. This is, I forget who. A number of years as a biologist. At university, I took a number of courses where evolution was stressed and taught as fact. I have since learned better. If it could be shown that, in fact, dinosaurs and man were contemporaries, that would be kind of hard on the geological column and evolutionary theory.
Yeah.
And we've already heard other words to the same effect. Proof that dinosaurs and man existed together would shake the foundations of evolutionary theory. Some of the pieces include a human figure with a dinosaur. In this case, they don't seem to be getting along very well.
They're playing.
They may be playing. I don't know.
Dino
I guess-
and Fred.
That could be a really, really big dog, but I don't think so. Here's the one that interests me the most. These fantastic dinosaur figurines threaten the orthodox concepts of timescales in many fields of studies. Dr. Ivan T. Sanderson was amazed in 1955 to find that there was an accurate representation of its American dinosaur Brachiosaurus, almost totally unknown at that time to the general public. Sanderson wrote about this particular dinosaur in the Jules Rudd collection. This figurine is a very fine, jet black, polished looking ware. It is about a foot tall. The point is, it is an absolutely perfect representation of Brachiosaurus, known only from East Africa and North America. There are a number of outlines of the skeletons in the standard literature, but only one fleshed out reconstruction that I have ever seen. This is exactly like it. And that's what I was talking about. It wasn't until fairly late in the game that we started putting these bones together and fleshing them out, coming up with ideas of what these things look like, and even understanding their behavior. And this figurine from probably 3,000 or 4,000 years ago,
Yeah.
2,000 anyway, seems to represent Brachiosaurus perfectly. The scientists were amazed at what a good representation this was. How did the Chupacaro Indians know what Brachiosaurus looked like? Dinosaurs including duck-billed Trachodon, Gorgosaurus, horned Monoclonius, all these, I'm not even going to read them.
I don't blame it.
They'll get longer and longer.
Harder and harder to pronounce.
Now, initially
There's Leviathan, that's mentioned in the Bible.
where's Leviathan? This is actually Iguanodon. And this is what's interesting, because Iguanodon was this dinosaur that had an almost horse-like head, horse-like mouth, and this kind of triangular shape to the top of its head that we knew from the fossils. And so we had, these representations of Iguanodon, and there's the horse-like mouth and the kind of triangle shape on the top of the head. And they found this rock carving. And tell me that is not an Iguanodon. Tell me that is something else other than an exact representation of an iguanodon. Look at the top of its head,
Yeah.
that kind of triangular shape, almost concave sort of shape that it had to the top of its head. Now, initially they did carbon dating on some of the clay sculptures. And these are some of the dates they came up with: 1640 BC, 4530 BC, 1110 BC. Those are great. Those are very telling. Basically from about 3 to 6,000 years ago, 3,000 to 6,500 years ago. It gets better. In 1972, Arthur Young submitted 2 of the figurines to Dr. Froelich Rainey, the director of the Pennsylvania Museum for Thermoluminescent Dating. The Mazca lab had obtained thermoluminescent dates up to 2700 BC in a letter dated September 13, 1972, addressed to Mr. Young. Dr. Rainey wrote, "Now, after we have had years of experimentation both here and at the lab in Oxford, we have no doubt about the dependability of the thermoluminescent method. We may have errors up to 5 to 10% in absolute dating, but we are no longer concerned about unexpected bugs that might put the whole system in doubt. Thermoluminescent dating, when natural materials are exposed to sunlight, they undergo a process, and I'm not at all able to explain. When we're trying to date strata around a fault to characterize fault movement or fault activity, we will collect samples for thermoluminescent dating. The sample has to be collected in the dark, either by a method that keeps it dark or literally in the dark. And then it's tested to see basically how long it's been since that sample was exposed to light. That's probably somewhat inaccurate, but simply put, that explains it. We use it, we don't need carbon. We can use it on regular sediments, and we can date strata. And according to this stuff right here, we can do it accurately. Well, they did that on some of these figurines. And that's where they came up with about 2700 BC. So these figurines are about 4,700 years old, give or take. Some of them may be younger or older, but they're not 65 million years old. And they were done by people 4,500 or so years ago who didn't have museums yet to look at this stuff. They just had to base this on their own observations. And here we see another figurine that is very much like a known dinosaur. So did they exist based on the fossils? Yes. Behemoth, Job 40, 15 through 24. I believe that's a dinosaur. And I'll get back to that in just a moment. The sea monsters, Tanning, from Genesis 1:21, Job 7:12, Psalm 91:13. Yes, there were dinosaurs. Leviathan, Job 41:1, Psalm 74:14, Psalm 104:26, Isaiah 27:1. Yes. Now, let's tie this to the Bible. Have you heard any debate about exactly what behemoth was?
Yeah, some say it could have been a hippo or a rhino.
Yep.
Or anything that wasn't able to be tamed, like an alligator or something like that.
Okay.
I've heard that as for Leviathan, a huge croc or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, behemoth, generally, people would think, in the creations that we see today.
Well, what are a couple of things that the Bible says about behemoth that...
Well, it could be, you couldn't put a ring in his nose and lead it around. Or you couldn't really...
I think that was Leviathan.
Oh, it was Leviathan, okay.
It says about behemoth, he is the first of the ways of God, let his maker bring near his sword. Which I think is Job's way of saying, or the writer's way of saying, that man could not manage this creature.
Yeah, you couldn't kill it.
It had to be managed by God.
Right.
Well, I think eventually we could kill them, and I think that's why the dinosaurs went extinct, is we probably overhunted them. Because that's what we do, right? We overhunt stuff.
The whole city was one of them.
But what physical characteristics does the Bible ascribe to behemoth that lead us to either look at modern animals or to look at dinosaurs? What you guys remember this
They
stuff?
spoke about his tail, I think.
He
and-
bends his tail like a cedar.
Yeah, that's right, like a cedar, and then,
His limbs are like bars of iron,
Right.
and his legs tubes of bronze.
right,
Now, I like to find modern day analogs for various stuff. And this discussion about the limbs does sound to me very much like an elephant.
right.
However, when we get
Not
to the
the
tail
tail.
part,
No,
that would be an awfully young cedar
yeah,
if that elephant's tail is being bent like a cedar.
right.
So what animal does bend its tail like a cedar these days?
It could have been like a croc or an alligator.
A big crocodile or an alligator.
Yeah,
But they have wimpy little legs.
yeah, they do.
So they don't fit the description
No, they
either.
don't.
I believe I can settle the debate,
Okay,
and I can settle it right now. And then we're pretty much done. Job, chapter 40, verses 15 through 24. Behold now, behemoth,
okay.
which I made as well as you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold now, his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He bends his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Let his maker bring near his sword. Surely the mountains bring him food, and all the beasts of the earth play there. Under the lotus plants he lies down, in the covert of the reeds and the marsh. The lotus plants cover him with shade. The willows of the brook surround him. If a river rages, he is not alarmed. He is confident, though the Jordan rushes to his mouth.
Yeah, all that part could sound sort of like a croc or alligator, but the other parts in the beginning didn't. Like the
If a river rages, the elephant is bouncing downstream with the current.
yeah,
The crocodiles and alligators are hiding in the side eddies, or just going downstream with the current. The hippos, boing, 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 downstream with the current. Argentinosaurus was a sauropod dinosaur that was 128 feet from the tip of its nose to the end of its tail, and it stood 60 feet high at its back.
Oh,
That animal would stand in the raging river and say, whatever.
how's he gonna be under the lotus plants or lie down in the,
Well, they're big plants, big trees, whatever.
right, right?
I mean, there's a lot in this passage that we'd have to wrap our heads around. But it comes down to that last statement. If a river rages,
Yeah.
he's not alarmed. He's confident, though the Jordan rushes to his mouth. There is not a modern day animal that fits that description. That is a sauropod dinosaur, a four-legged long neck. A T-Rex, bouncing downstream, most likely. But a Brontosaurus, a Brachiosaurus, an Argentinosaurus, an Edmontosaurus, perhaps even an Apatosaurus, would stand in the raging river and just let the waters roll.
Yeah, anything that big would, yeah.
That, folks, right there, I think, pegs behemoth as a dinosaur. Go back to the beginning of the passage. Behold now, behemoth,
Yeah.
which I made as well as you. God is talking to Job
Yeah,
about things that Job either wouldn't understand or couldn't manage. After Job wanted to know what's going on, and God is basically showing him that it's not yours to know everything.
yeah, that's right.
But I love you and I'm going to take care of you anyway. And he tells him all these things. And he talks about behemoth. Job saw behemoth. Behemoth was a dinosaur. I believe 100% based on this passage. And not the tail and the legs, but the fact that this animal would manage a raging river. Thoughts? Anyone want to argue with me?
So roughly that would be the length of this auditorium plus a little bit taller?
A Brachiosaurus could probably fill the auditorium and the back might be a little too high. Argentinosaurus would look a little bit more like this whole building.
Wow.
128 feet. This auditorium is 75 feet long, maybe, and that's
8 feet.
12 feet high.
12 feet
So
high. Wow,
12, 24. Argentinosaurus would have been 5 times the height of the ceiling.
goodness.
Oh, that's a big animal.
No.
Really?
It is a big animal.
You don't want it to defend.
Oh,
I wouldn't want to run into that animal.
Or feed 'em.
So how do we know what happened to them? Why did they get extinct?
Well, according to some people in the Congo, they're not extinct yet
really?
because they talk about Mokele mbembe, that animal we looked at a few minutes ago that, though it doesn't eat humans or other animals, it is known to aggressively defend its young. And it kind of tied to that one slide.
Look like a brontosaurus. Nope. Nope.
I thought it was here.
No, you keep going.
Nope.
Where it went.
Oh, it was
There it
with the
was.
Ika burial
There it
stones.
was. No, not that one.
Okay.
There it is.
So in this stone, we see a sauropod type dinosaur. So 4 legs, long tail, long neck, okay? And it's got this guy by the neck. So obviously they're not getting along. This stone seems to show a man being attacked by an Apatosaurus. That was a small-ish sauropod dinosaur. It is reported by pygmies living in the Congo that a large animal called Mokele mbembe, an animal that best fits the description of a sauropod dinosaur, is said to aggressively defend itself and its territory and will attack humans and other animals but never eat them. The scene on this stone seems to show very similar behavior, giving credibility to both accounts, the account on this stone and the account of these people in the Congo.
Oh,
So are they totally extinct?
we don't know.
We don't know, but there's evidence that some of them may actually still be around.
Oh.
And I did pose the question when I was teaching this, a second version of this to our adult class at Bostonia. I knew that I had to change tack a little bit after the first session. It had gone so well in the young adults class, I thought, great, right into it. You remember Bud Clark? He would sit up at the front, like 3 pews back, right over there. And I'm standing in the pulpit during Bible class doing this lesson. And the whole time, Bud Clark is sitting there with this look on his face like, it wasn't as bad as I thought, but I definitely kind of altered things a little bit. Where was I going to go with that?
Senior moment.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought of that when I was thinking of this, but what was the question? I was hoping this would never happen today. Oh, as we were discussing the dinosaurs and man in that class, and I think Stephen was there and Mandy, and they were sitting right down in front over here. And I posed the question, if it wasn't an asteroid, or maybe somebody else asked, 65 million years ago, what killed them? And one of them, and I think it was Mandy, suggested overhunting.
Haven't we done that today?
How many animals have we overhunted? Almost to the point of extinction.
Buffalo.
The buffalo would have definitely been extinct if
But they
a few
were
of them
really
had
going
Buffalo?
survived.
whales.
Mhm.
The eastern North Pacific right whale is so endangered, there's only about 30 to 50 individuals left. Now they're coming back because we're protecting them.
Yeah.
They come back slowly. I had the privilege of actually seeing an eastern North Pacific right whale from the airplane once when I was flying out over the coast by La Jolla. And we saw one, we circled it a few times. My daughter's future mother-in-law got some pictures with her iPhone. I didn't even try with my camera. It was hard to see it. I mean, it was just kind of lollygagging.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be a really endangered whale that we have almost hunted to extinction. And how many, I mean, there used to be
The dodo bird?
hundreds of thousands of blue whales, several 100,000 blue whales, and now there's, 30 or 40,000. They're doing okay. Anyway, yes, we tend to overhunt things. We tend to hunt stuff to extinction.
How would you bring down a big animal like that?
Uh,
I can't even imagine.
Over time, we develop our ways.
Wow.
Today, we wouldn't have any trouble at all bringing down something
No,
like that.
Get your pipe and jump on his back and,
Just beat it to death.
Well, who knows?
who knows?
What's the reproduction rate of these big animals?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
I can't imagine it's like rabbits.
They
No.
might have just ate all their eggs.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Or somebody else might have eaten all their eggs.
Yeah.
I don't think the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. If they are extinct, they went extinct 500 years ago, give or take.
Wow.
And they may not even be extinct yet.
That's the thing, the world is really so big with so many little hidey holes.
Yeah.
We haven't explored all of them.
Luckily, in this country, we have explored most of them. And I say luckily because I can't tell you how much I would hate to come around from behind a tree and find myself face to face with a T-Rex. That's the stuff of absolute nightmares. Or, I mean, worse yet, a couple of velociraptors.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Africa seems to be the place where you might go actually see something like that. So, of all the places I want to travel, maybe not Africa,
Yeah.
because I just don't want to get eaten by a T-Rex.
Yeah.
How about a hippopotamus? Do you know that they managed to kill more people than just about anything else?
Yeah, they kill you.
Because they're so goofy looking, who's going to take it seriously?
Yeah.
But it is one of the most
Very
ferocious and over short distances, very fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yes.
I had a small comment since you went back to the dinosaur you have here, Mokele Mbembe. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
I don't either, but that's how I say it.
I Googled it real quick, and it says in the Bantu language it means one who stops the flow of rivers.
Ooh, interesting.
Ooh, there you go, just like in the Bible.
Well,
Hey,
that would be an animal that's big enough to sit in a river and not be alarmed.
they not only had, they also say that these dinosaurs existed in the oceans and in the river. They had a prehistoric fish and
Yeah.
all that. So there must be a way that those all of a sudden just disappeared too.
Did they?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
So there was a fossil fish called coelacanth we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And all of a sudden, in the 1930s, they caught a live one. And they've caught more live ones now.
Yeah.
The coelacanths are alive and well and doing fine. We can't see everything.
Right.
And if fossils are not as completely old as some paleontologists want them to be, philosophically, it leaves a lot of room for a lot of this stuff to still be around. And sometimes things just go extinct because it is their time.
Yeah, and not just that, plant life. They've even got fossils of this. So a plant life that's extinct now, or they think is.
Mhm.
That all they try to tie all back to the certain age of the dinosaur. Yeah.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Suffice to say, so let me go back to that last slide. These are the debate points. First of all, are you talking about good science or bad science? Example, the Brontosaurus etching on the wall under the Kachina Bridge in Natural Bridges National Monument. Say that 4 times fast. That's real iffy in my mind. There's explanations that the naysayers can give that I have a hard time refuting.
Oh.
The clay sculptures of the Chupacaro Indians, on the other hand, being dated by thermoluminescence at 4500 BC, that is evidence it's very hard for the naysayer to refute. So that's really good science, in my opinion. You have to consider design versus chance and look at a lot of these things through that window. Is this better explained with a designer, or is it easily enough explained that it came about just by chance? Rarely will chance be adequate to explain it. Most things can be explained by a designer, and most things seem to have evidence that there was a designer, like the flagellum motor. Just almost completely impossible to happen without somebody actually putting
That
it
is the
together.
weirdest thing, you know? I've seen that on different films and movies I've watched about it.
Yeah.
That is-
Believing in the power of God. And this is something you're going to have to pull on some of your brethren as well as the world at large. Because of our wonderful science, people want to, 4.5 billion years old and all this stuff, and they just think that we geologists and paleontologists are so smart, we got all this stuff all worked out, and we're just dead on, irrefutable. And some atheists view the evolutionary data as being absolutely irrefutable. You cannot argue with it. But for the one who has faith but struggles with it, remind them that God is powerful and could have actually built it all in 6 days. He could have built it in 6 nanoseconds
Yeah.
to be exactly what it is now. And if you believe in the power of God and keep that in mind in this discussion, it helps.
We tend to limit God's ability by the limitation of man's ability.
Or just our ability to think or conceive of stuff.
Yeah.
We think that we can see. See, after the eruption of Mount St. Helens, there was, actually during that eruption, there was a tremendous amount of material that was deposited off the slopes of the mountain and out to the north into Spirit Lake and up against Coldwater One and all that. Hundreds of feet of sediment was deposited like that with that eruption. Some of it sedimentary type stuff, some of it was more like volcanic ash and whatever, but there was just, I think I heard something like 400 feet of sediment. What happened was like 1/10 the depth of the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
A few years later, there was a tremendous amount of snow on the mountain, and it experienced a minor eruptive event that heated up the mountain and melted all that snow like that, and it came flowing down and carved canyons in that sediment that were 1/10 the depth of the Grand Canyon.
So you could see the whole thing.
So you could see all the strata, you could see these canyons carved into stuff like that. I suggested that you find and watch Is Genesis History.
Yeah.
The beginning of that movie, have you seen it? The beginning of that, I forget the name of the guy that narrates it. It's a really kind of a weird name.
I've seen it, I think, on one of those movies.
Is it on YouTube?
I'm sure it's on YouTube, but you can,
It's a documentary.
yeah, just look it up. Look it up on the internet and find it. And
I may have a copy of it in the podium right there.
really,
Really?
I'll have to look, but I've got some stuff there. I know that we watched it here.
there's way too much stuff to go through right
Yeah,
now.
it's been a few years, but when we first got the TVs installed, we did play it one day.
Oh,
Well, you remember
There was I?
I don't remember. It was
remember
long-
how the movie starts? The narrator is
I heard of
walking
it.
through these beautiful hills with little rolling streams, and the hills are all grass covered, and there's little flowers and plants growing all over the place. And he's talking about this scene, this environment, and how long to develop all of this, and just this beautiful area. And then he makes the statement, 30 years ago, none of this was here. He was on the north side of Mount St. Helens, and he was walking through what looked like a fairly mature, well-grown
Area.
landscape. But it was something that 30 years before had been completely different. And that is consistent with biblical teaching and is not consistent with much of evolutionary
Right.
doctrine. So that's the bottom line today. Have I demonstrated that there's a better consistency between many of these things, the Big Bang Theory, transition species, intelligent design, dinosaurs? Is there a better consistency between those sciences and biblical teaching, or those sciences and evolutionary teaching?
Right, biblical teaching.
I hope that I've demonstrated that biblical teaching, scripture, is more consistent with some of these things.
Yeah.
So this is what you take out there into the world. Find somebody that's searching. Maybe they're struggling with this stuff a bit. And just be about the business of showing them that they can pay attention to scripture and still be a science nerd. I am testimony to that.
I am.
That scripture is not contradictory to the scientific record if they're willing to look at what the record really says.
Right.
So,
You know,
thoughts?
And I do like science, and in school, they taught us kingdom, phylum, and a family, order, genus, species.
Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. How do I remember
that's
that?
class out. But in particular, I like purple flowers. And Frank and I have traveled a fair amount. I always am looking for purple flowers. And everywhere we go, I see purple flowers that I have never seen before. And that's specific down to genus and species.
Okay.
How could just any random thing do that? I could go my whole life and never see all the purple flowers in the world.
I forget the order. I believe the Bible says that God created the grasses, the flowering plants, and then the seed plants. And in the evolution of plants, which I don't find very interesting, so I haven't spent much time on it. Sorry. Purple flowers are pretty, but
Yeah,
I'd rather see a bald eagle.
yeah.
That seems to be the order that these things came about in the evolution of plants. Now we're seeing that evolution over millennia, and the reality is that evolution occurred in a day
Yeah.
during the creation. But it's still a consistent facet
Yeah.
that if the Bible says them in a certain order, and that is the order that we seem to see them coming about, there we have a little consistency between biblical teaching and science.
Exactly.
And feel free to go out and beat people over the head with these little consistencies. So what I'm going to do, like I say, I'm going to save this PowerPoint for Max here. He can convert it to a PDF and print out copies for you guys. If somebody actually wants the PowerPoint, you're welcome to it. This is all just stuff that I found on the internet and found from my books and whatnot. So none of it is proprietary, and it's not really my own intellectual thing, other than just
No
organizing it.
copyright.
None of it's copyrighted. Well, at least not by me. Don't make a book called The Collapse of Evolution. Name yourself Scott M. Hughes and try to sell the book, because you might actually get in trouble for that. Yeah.
God can do anything he wants. Anything.
I think so.
When I hear the definition of day, as you know, a day on Earth and a day on Mars, and they're all different. Now, we talked earlier, I said 2 miles down you can find seashells.
Hmm.
Now, God couldn't do that. But I'm just wondering, I thought of something. Could a day mean throughout God's universe?
Well,
I think when he says evening and morning,
That
he
pretty much
defines
says-
his 24-hour period.
he's talking to the Jews. They understood a day to begin about dinner time, evening,
That's right.
and to end the next afternoon. So when he says evening and morning, rather than morning and evening like we would, one day and a second day and so on, he's communicating to the Jews, who the book was originally written to, I believe. He's communicating something very specific there. There was evening and morning one day. I don't see anything in that scripture that would suggest that God might have had a hidden meaning in there. As long as he's powerful enough to have done anything he did on any one of those days within that day, and I absolutely believe he is, I don't see a reason to try to find a different definition of day.
I'd like to see what a day actually looked like. What is in a day?
Well, there was evening and morning.
The day
Shells,
start-
fish die, they sink, new ones are born, they sink, the compression,
Okay,
all this.
that's an important point, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it gives me an excuse to take another 5 minutes of your valuable time. Fossils. They're defined in our textbooks as evidence of past life. They're not. They're evidence of past death.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of a fine distinction. But we find these fossil beds. There was just an extremely interesting article titled "The Day the Dinosaurs Died." Supposedly, when that asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula, it caused a tsunami-like event that washed all the way up into the northern tier of the central United States. That's entirely possible. And they find these beds of dinosaur bones, like 4 feet thick. And they say that that's taking them down to the moment that the dinosaurs died. They find evidence of, like, when the asteroid hit, it would have broken up into a lot of pieces and they would have fallen all over the place. But it also probably would have ejected a lot of stuff up into the upper atmosphere and even low orbit that would have then come back in as like little mini meteors and stuff like that. I forget the term for them, but we'll find around meteorite impacts these little mini impact points. And they find some of those up in that area, and then they find these bone beds where all the dinosaurs, I mean, they just got wiped and plopped right there.
You know, when you go down to the Grand Canyon, one time when I went from the top to the bottom, I picked up a rock from every strata. And then I put them back together in my garage one day. It was about that tall. And there must have been a dozen or 2 dozen different rocks in there. God can do anything he wants. But it just seems to me like if he did it the way we think he did it, in one day, it would have had to be in milliseconds. One layer, another layer, another layer, another layer.
Well, but
It just
but
is
hold on.
not.
When we're talking about the shells deep in the sediments or at the top of a mountain, we're not talking about the 6 days of creation there. And this is what I was about to get
Blood,
to.
yeah.
We're talking about the flood now.
Mhm.
We're talking about the flood. There's a movie. How many of you are familiar with the Institute for Creation Research, ICR? It's down in Santee, near where I live. They've got some really good stuff, and they got some really bonehead stuff. There's this one movie that they have called Grand Canyon Testament to the Flood, I think is what it's called. And that movie puts out 7 different pieces of evidence from Grand Canyon sediments that support that those sediments were deposited during a global flood.
Yeah.
5 of them are really strong pieces of evidence, in my opinion. 2 of them are really weak. And I would prefer that the movie was 10 minutes shorter, took out those 2 things, emphasized the other stuff a little bit more. I think you would have had a stronger presentation. And that's just good science versus bad science stuff, and I deal with that all the time. But it's worth finding. Grand Canyon Monument to the Flood. Grand Canyon Monument to the Flood. That's the name of the movie. It's worth a look.
They found evidence of the flood throughout the world.
Yes, they do. And they find evidence of the flood throughout the world. I have to chuckle a little bit when they say other civilizations also talk about the flood. Wait a minute. That's kind of not possible, maybe.
Not if everybody got
Unless
you.
they wrote it down really quick when it started raining
Yeah.
and
Or maybe they
put the
have-
tablets in the safe so that they were protected, and then went off and died. There are large flood events, even today. We see them sometimes. But there was one global flood that was in the book
That's
of
what I'm talking
Genesis.
about.
And I think that accounts for, one, much of the distribution of sea life fossils that we see, shells at the top of mountains. I mean, Mount Everest.
Mhm.
The top of Mount Everest is sedimentary rock.
Really.
You know, how do you get up there?
Plates.
Well, plates, but it also says after the flood, the valleys dropped down, the mountains rose up, all of this stuff was going on.
Yeah.
After the flood, our earth, I think, was very dynamic according to the Bible. And that could account for some of these mountain ranges rising up, valleys dropping down, whatever. It's what the Bible says. The topography kind of agrees with it.
Yeah.
If you get away from the slow march of time, it helps to explain it. But the fact that we find marine fossils in so many, in the Coyote Mountains, east of San Diego County, out in the desert, there's a fossil bed up there that I like to go collect. It's got oyster shells in it. And it's up at the top of the Coyote Mountains, which are in the middle of the desert. So we have so many examples of that, and I believe that most, if not all of that, is flood generated. It didn't have to happen one day during the creation. It happened over a period of years following the 40 days and 40 nights
Took
of
a
rain.
while
It
to
was the
dry
flood.
that up. Yeah.
They had to float around for a couple of years before they finally found land to settle on, and
That's right.
during that time, a lot of stuff was going on. The Rocky Mountain Arsenal. They were injecting liquid hazardous waste deep into the earth on the east side of the Rockies. And it started making earthquakes. Because what they were doing was they were lubricating these old dead fault zones. And if there was any shear strain at all along these fault zones, it was causing them to move now that they're well lubricated. And they stopped doing that, and the earthquake stopped. Water is a tremendous lubricator for geology, and it can make geology go a lot faster. There's even studies of the Salton Sea and seismicity on the San Andreas Fault during times when either the Salton Sea or ancient Lake Cahuilla covered the area versus times when it's been dry. And there appears to be more seismicity during times when that's covered with water. So
The
after
San
the,
Bernardino Mountains are growing about a half an inch a year.
yeah, I know, they grew quite a bit in, what was it, June of 1992? When the Landers earthquake, which actually sort of spawned my master's thesis, which was on one of the faults that didn't break in that
I
earthquake
had a
down in the
house
Western
that
Mojave.
got that one.
Huh?
I had a house that got hit on that Landers.
My family has a little cabin up at Twin Peaks, and the cabin wasn't damaged, but there was nothing left on any shelves after that earthquake. Nothing. And that was the Big Bear earthquake that happened, I think, about 3 hours before. No, 3 hours after the Landers earthquake.
So
Landers was at 5 a.m.
aftershock?
Hmm?
Was it an aftershock?
Doesn't
No.
kind of look like it, because it was
Probably.
two completely different kinds of faults, and I mean, they're not too, I guess maybe, I would say more likely it was what you'd call triggered slip, where one area moves and that changes the stress regime for a region, and it pushes another fault beyond its failure, and that fault fails,
Makes sense.
which is a little different than an aftershock. Sorry about the over explanation.
That's okay.
So anyway, any more thoughts?
We thank you.
It's been very interesting.
Very interesting.
I appreciate your attention. And be sure to tell everybody who left early that they missed the best part. Unless you thought one of the other parts was the best part, in which case you can tell them whatever you want.
Well, I sure didn't know that there were pictographs and things that showed man interacting with dinosaurs. And American Indians interacting with them, you know?
And some of these things are really compelling evidence. The Chupacaro Indians of Acambaro, Mexico. Somebody suggested that they were all made up and buried. And what I read somewhere was to test that possibility. Now, the fact that they're dating thermoluminescence at 4,500 BC suggests, or 4,500 years ago suggests there's no way that they could have been like made up recently,
Yeah.
because they would date it, a few tens of years. But I think what I read is they went to the police chief's home in the town there. His home had been there since like 1924. So they went inside and they saw cut a part of the floor and dug down, and they found the figurines and statues under there. So that made them predate 1924, which, according to this piece I was reading, predated any possibility of shenanigans with that stuff. The Ica burial stones are loaded with shenanigans. They're just a really nice, consistent little picture, and they're very visual. But I wouldn't build my argument based on the Ica burial stones. You read about them, and it is hilarious to read the shenanigans that went on with this stuff, and
Yeah,
and some of them depicting alien visitations. Like, that doesn't help.
you know.